Hello and welcome to Revenge of the Drive-In. This time we've got an episode on Brian De Palma's Sisters from 1972 and the 1955 film noir Women's Prison. I am your host Patrick and I am joined as usual by...
Woman Lover Jim. Hello everybody. Hello Patrick.
Did not expect that. Okay. Peeping Tom, Jim, perhaps to reference the first scene of...
Okay.
That's a wild way to open the movie, by the way, Sisters.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing.
It's a weird movie entirely, but yeah. Yeah, let's just get into Sisters. I enjoyed this movie. I had seen it once before, maybe twice. I didn't remember it too well. I knew it was weird. I knew it was Siamese twins. I thought maybe it was kind of the same plot as Basket Case, where they're just trying to kill the people that separated them, but no, that's not the case. You know, it's a Brian De Palma film. Brian De Palma is a very talented filmmaker, but in the movies I've seen from him, he's also a very frustrating one because he wears his influences on his sleeve to the point where it kind of seems like imitation at times. Body Double, of course, which we featured on this podcast, basically combining Rear Window and Vertigo with all the sleaze of the 1980s. I rather enjoy Body Double. Dress to Kill, not featured on this podcast, is very, very Argento.
Yes, yeah.
This movie, I would say, of these three, probably the least homage-y, but there's definitely a lot of Psycho in there. Also, I haven't seen it, but Blowout, as I understand, is just Antonioni's Blow Up, but entertaining. So it's probably great because Blow Up is a brilliant film, but it is the most boring thing ever. That's my initial thoughts on Sisters before we get into it. If you have any comments, please proceed, Jim.
I looked up to see the first Siamese twins in Canada, and it was not Danielle and Dominique.
Well, sure.
Also,
Did you want this to be a true story?
No, I mean, it would be more exciting if it was. Also, give me a second here, because I have her Wikipedia page open.
Margot Kidder?
Yeah. Did you read it?
No, I mean, I know Margot Kidder, obviously, because she's Lois Lane, of course, most famously. Speaking of which, we have Martha Kent from the 1978 Superman in Women's Prison. Yeah, Margot Kidder was also in Black Christmas, of course. She's hilarious in Black Christmas. A very sad life she had. She had bipolar disorder. I think she was homeless for a period of time, and just not a very fun, exciting life post-fame, I guess. She passed away not too long ago.
Yeah, 2018 by alcohol and a drug overdose.
Okay.
Interestingly, she does speak of her acting career kind of fondly.
Yeah, she is Canadian, by the way. I mean, I assume
she was born in Yellowknife or something like that.
Oh, way up there. Okay.
Yeah,
I assume maybe she was. I mean, Jim, how do you feel about her Quebec accent?
I think it sounds better than actual Quebecers.
Okay, so maybe not super accurate. Maybe it's just kind of a French accent then. I didn't really know. I wasn't sure if she was French Canadian or not.
No, I think her dad was like American. Her mom was, I don't know what, but she was born up in Yellowknife. The thing about her accent is it's less phlegmy than French Canadians, which makes it nice. But listen to this, dude. I knew she had, some issues. She lived in Montana. That's where she died, in her house.
Okay, that's an issue right there.
Yeah, but she used to feed wolves. She lived at like this foot of a mountain, and she used to feed wolves. She used to go out and feed them like meat, and then she would retreat to her house and watch them from the comfort of her home. And she said to her friends that if they came to her house and found her dead, tell no one, place her naked body in a bed sheet, drag it up Canyon Mountain, and leave it for her other friends, the wolves.
So is this what they did?
Well, you tell me. She was cremated, and her ashes were scattered.
So then why would I tell you? Are you injecting some kind of conspiracy that she wasn't actually cremated?
Well, this is what, I don't know, because it's Wikipedia, and Margot Kidder, I don't know who wrote her Wikipedia page, but, she's obviously got this fondness for wolves, but when she died, she was cremated, her ashes were scattered by her brother in, favorite childhood locations across Canada, and...
Chuck E. Cheese's.
Yeah.
The Chuck E. Cheese in Mississauga. Yeah.
But it says here in the article that her ashes were spread amongst lilies, often eaten by grizzly bears, partially fulfilling Kidder's wish to have her body just left out there for the bears.
I mean,
I don't. But are they bears?
I
or
don't think
wolves
that qualifies. Well, it's also like, I don't know, whatever. So I feel bad repeating this, but I still remember. So way back when I saw the original, or not the 1978 Superman, I loved it. And then I saw Superman 2. At the time, anyways, I think this is kind of slowed down, but at the time, people seem to talk about Superman 2 as being like one of the best sequels ever, maybe even better than the first. I don't think it is, but I remember reading a review for that. This was back when I like religiously looked at Rotten Tomatoes, and this is before. I'm sorry, side tangent from a side tangent, but Rotten Tomatoes, the website, is like unusable now. If you type in the name of a movie, it will have everything that has that word in the title show up with no attention to like how prominent the movie is. Like, let's say you type Frankenstein in, you're going to come across like 8 or 9 just garbage Frankenstein movies that no one has ever seen before you get to like any Boris Karloff movie. It's disgusting. Yeah, I don't know how they live with themselves over at Rotten Tomatoes.
What a dumb search engine.
But yeah, anyways, I remember reading a review for Superman 2 because Superman 2, Superman loses his powers because he chooses to be with Lois Lane. It's very, I choose a mortal life, Lord of the Rings, Arwen.
Yes, yeah.
It's very much like that. I have seen those two things compared. But I remember the review was like, Superman has to choose between saving the world and being with Margot Kidder. And luckily for the world, Margot Kidder is not that attractive. It's like, oh, Jesus, that's something we would say. You don't put that in like an actual review.
Also, she's not.
Also, she is attractive in this movie. I don't think I don't think she's that gorgeous in like the Superman movies, but in Sisters, this is probably her height of being very attractive. So. I don't think they would have said that review if it came down to Sisters, if it were a decision for Emile to choose between Margot Kidder and saving the world.
Yeah, I think I know which one he's picking.
But which Margot Kidder is he picking? That's the question.
Oh, well, the one that doesn't twitch.
The one that's alive. How about that?
Spoilers.
Sisters. They were once one in body, and perhaps one in mind. Danielle and Dominique. One loving, one hating, one innocent, the other... Where does Danielle end and Dominique begin?
So the movie opens in a very weird way. It opens on a candid camera style reality show or whatever called Peeping Toms.
It's a game show. There's
this guy, Philip Wood, who sees a blind woman in like a changing room, and he has to decide, what should I do? And then the game show part, they have like people vote on it, like, oh, what do they think he is going to do? And the 3 options they have don't make sense.
No.
They're all just like, phrases. It's like one of them is like, I don't remember what they are, but I'm tempted to say like stop, drop, and roll, or don't ask, don't tell. It's weird like phrases like that. But anyways, he ends up, I guess, doing the right thing. He doesn't stay and watch. But then he, on the show, meets the woman who actually is not blind. That was the whole thing. And this is Danielle Breton, a French-Canadian model, played, of course, by Margot Kidder. What do they win as being part of this show? Well, they win a dinner at the Rainforest Cafe. I don't know what else. What do they call it? It's like the Africa Club or something. But
the Africa Room, I think.
Yeah, the Africa Room. It's somewhere in Manhattan. It looks funny because they just have this like close up of this like ugly looking gorilla paper mache thing, and it's like the worst Rainforest Cafe you can imagine, and that this is like a reward for
taking part in a
non-children.
Yeah.
It's very odd. But the two of them are talking, she talks a little bit about her career and being in New York and everything. She's, of course, from Canada. He thought she was French. And then they're interrupted by this one asshole who's kind of a mysterious character throughout the movie, but she claims he's her ex-husband. Mm-hmm. And Philip gets, the waitstaff and whoever to basically just throw that guy out. So, and then he offers to take her home, but then learns that she lives on Staten Island, but he still takes her home. So They have a nice little moment on the ferry where they look at the World Trade Center, which was pretty brand new at the time.
Oh, okay. Nice, very nice.
And they share a kiss, and then they go to her apartment. And as they're in there, he notices that the ex-husband is like outside the building, just kind of like looking. And then the two of them have sex. And it's revealed to the audience, though not to Philip, that she has a lot of scar tissue on her hip, presumably from where she was separated from her Siamese twin. I suppose we should mention as well that the opening credits are done over like images of like conjoined twin fetuses, conjoined twins, yeah. Also, the music. So I mentioned there's a lot of Psycho in this movie. And that comes down to the music. Brian De Palma must have been absolutely thrilled to be working with Bernard Herrmann. I don't think the score sounds that much like Psycho. We're not talking about Reanimator here. But still, like, it's that old-timey, super dramatic, like, loud, threatening music.
Yes, yeah.
So Philip wakes up. He's got, like, some scratches on his back.
Some love scratches.
Danielle... She goes into the bathroom and she, like, takes out some pills, but she doesn't end up taking them. She leaves them by the sink, and they're later accidentally flushed down the sink by Philip in something that I feel like he should have obviously noticed, but whatever.
Yeah.
And Danielle goes into another room to speak with her sister. We see the shadows of the two women, and they're speaking in French. Of course, we do see the subtitles. They're kind of arguing about, like, oh, the sister didn't really want her to have a man here and stuff like that. And this is where I was really reminded of Psycho, of the scene when Norman goes up to his house and has the argument with his mom that Janet Leigh overhears. Mm-hmm. But anyways, Philip wakes up, learns that it's her birthday, as well as, of course, her twin sister's birthday, and that the twin sisters come in to town to celebrate. So he goes out and he gets a cake. He goes to a bakery. The cake decorator's out, but he makes this kind of odd woman decorate it herself, and the writing's very poor, but it says Happy Birthday, Dominique and Danielle. And I say the writing was poor. I don't remember it looking bad, but...
Yeah, but there's like a line in the movie.
Later on, she says it was written by a child or something.
Yeah, and then the woman who does it, she's like, "Oh yeah, that was me. I did that." Yeah. And it's like, why would you admit that?
Well, and she wasn't offended or anything. But her thing is, again, this is why I say she's an odd character. There's like a surprising amount of detail about how she doesn't normally decorate cakes, but this one she had to. So there's some kind of odd character moments in this movie that I really liked. Like, it's just it adds a lot of personality to what's otherwise, I don't want to say straightforward, but I mean, it's just like a horror thriller, and then you get these like weird character things, and it's like, okay, this is like kind of comedic, and it mostly works.
I agree, and I don't know if there's like, if this is intentional comedy, but a little later after the scene when we're introduced to like this private detective or whatever.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah, I mean, he's quite comedic in the way he moves and acts, and all of his conversations between him and Grace.
Oh, for sure, that's intentional. He's listen, we're not doing the boring, straightforward private detective Arbogast. We've got a modern hip. Well, he's not hip, but he's got some big hips. But we got a 70s, 70s kind of sleazy, kind of funny, witty detective. It's great. But yeah, so Philip goes back to the apartment, and he's bringing the cake to her in bed. He's got the candles lit up. He even brings this giant knife to her so she can cut it. And then what does she do? She doesn't cut the cake. She cuts him violently. And I suppose I should also mention that we saw, perhaps related to the medicine, we saw Danielle kind of just like freak out and collapse.
Yeah, in like a white negligee or something, And...
Well, yeah, she wears that pretty much for half the movie, probably. Because she's like, if we were to say she's the lead, and I think there's a case to be made that Grace is the lead, and we haven't even met Grace yet. We've seen her. But if she's the lead, she disappears for like a third of the movie. Mm-hmm. And then if Grace is the lead, she's not in the first third of the movie, basically. So,
well, that's something in common with our second movie.
Something in common with Psycho, too, a bit, with Janet Leigh, how it kind of switches protagonists. Mm-hmm. But yeah, well, as for Women's Prison, we can get into this when we talk about that movie. I don't know if that movie really has a lead. I think that's an ensemble piece. Ida Lupino's top billed. She's not the lead.
Yes, yeah.
know?
No, yeah, you're right.
But anyways, the stabbing is horrifically violent. Again, the 70s, man. 70s horror movies. And this gets away with it because it's not a big studio movie. I believe this is an independent film. I had thought it was a Canadian film. It's not. I think I get it. I do kind of... I'm reminded a little bit of like early Cronenberg when I see this. Maybe that's why I'm thinking of it, just because it kind of looks ugly and dirty in the 70s. And but yeah, it's really violent. The stabbing is horrific. He gets stabbed in the thigh. There's that bright red blood. Gets stabbed like, in the mouth. Yeah. This is a very Argento or almost Fulci scene, particularly when they basically open up a second mouth for him, like in his cheek.
Yeah.
And this is presumably, of course, the twin sister. I mean, it's clearly Margot Kidder, but her hair is all different. She's wearing different clothes. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's a crazy person. Like, we just, when we see her...
She's twitching. She's having, like, convulsions.
Yeah. Think Arnold on the surface of Mars in Total Recall. And then after the stabbing, she kind of just, like... she kind of just doesn't know what to do. And we see Philip kind of just crawling, very slowly crawling, covered in blood. She had stabbed him again in the back. He makes his way to the window where he had seen a neighbor kind of looking at her, and he tries to write for help with his own blood on the window. Then we shift completely over to the perspective of this neighbor. This is Grace, played by, is it Jennifer Salt? Jessica Salt?
J Salt.
Yeah, something Salt. Himalayan pink salt.
Jennifer Salt.
Yeah, Jennifer Salt, okay. But she sees that and immediately calls the police. And of course, we get some visual storytelling informing us that she's a journalist, but she's also written articles very, very critical of the police, of NYPD, or if there's a Staten Island police or whatever.
There's one article titled, like, "Why do we call them pigs?" or something.
Yeah. And I think her thing is, like, she's been covering, like, drug stories and like, knows the police are, like, bringing drugs into the community and stuff. You know, when she's on the phone with the police, they don't want to take her seriously because of who she is. They know her. And then she also mentions that, you know, the guy that was killed or he's dying, he's a black guy. And then later on, when the police don't really take it seriously, she believes it's because the victim is a black guy. Even though I don't really think that. I think that's her bringing that into it because the police don't really have a reason to believe there is a victim.
Well, yeah, and it's funny that you brought that up because I was going to bring that up later. She says, like, to somebody on the phone, she said, "Oh, it's the police unwilling to try to find this murdered black guy." And it's like, well, you go into her apartment and there was, like, no evidence of anything.
I mean, there was blood on the couch, but they didn't find it.
Correct, yes.
Like, it's not the most thorough search job in the world. No. And that's because they don't take her seriously. Like, that part makes sense. I don't really think the movie establishes that it's because he's black. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Philip Wood, whatever actor that guy is, he's black, but that is as light-skinned as you can get. Like, from the distance, I'm not even sure she'd be able to tell he was black.
Dude, I was
watching...
What I mean? I was watching this movie with a buddy of mine.
He's like Jason Kidd.
I said something about this guy. I was like, oh yeah, this white guy, yada, yada, yada. And he's like, you mean black guy? I was like, no.
He definitely has a black man's hair.
Yes, yeah.
But his skin tone is pretty light. Like I could tell he was black or biracial or something. But again, her from across the street, I'm not sure she'd be able to. But, I mean, none of this is, of course, important. But as this is all happening, as the police are arriving, we are introduced to... I don't know what this is called. I'll just call it split screen. The Brian De Palma editing style. He does this in Carrie, I remember, at the prom scene, because he has a constant shot on Carrie, but then also shots shown along, next to it of all the shit going on, the doors closing, people catching on fire, stuff like that. I don't know if he did it in a whole lot of other movies, so maybe this is an early De Palma thing. As this stuff is all happening, the ex-husband, so as we see her waiting for the cops, we see the ex-husband enter, and the ex-husband, I guess, wakes up Danielle and says, like, what happened? And she sees, and then so they get to cleaning up and hiding the body. They hide the body in the couch, of course, which is a pull-out bed, because that's where they had sex. He cleans the window. It's mostly him doing the work.
Yeah.
He mops a little bit, and then as he's taking out like all of the garbage, like all of these paper towels or whatever that are covered in blood, he like falls and hits his head and just has this big bruise on his forehead.
And it's like the most spectacular fall I've ever seen. He fell so hard, his ankles shot up in the air. You know, like almost above his head.
But anyways, this editing technique, this split screen editing technique. Recently, I saw a movie that did this for the entire movie.
Oh.
It is called Wicked Wicked. It is another film featured in the 42nd Street Forever Blu-ray. The trailer was featured on that. And it's a movie shot in the Hotel Del in San Diego, famous hotel where Some Like It Hot takes place. And the entire movie is shot in that style, and it's like this kind of murder mystery thing. And I gotta say, This technique works better in small doses. I'll just say it. That must have been like a super unique film experience in 1968. It might have even been in like 3D or something. But like De Palma knows how to do this in like an interesting way. It's because these moments are happening simultaneously, but we need to see both of them. We need to see Grace's like panic with the police, and we need to see what's going on over there, because we basically need. This is our first indication. I mean, we've known the ex-husband's a creep. This is our first indication that he's not really an ex-husband, that there's, like, more going on.
Yeah, and talking about this style for a second, I thought it was really interesting. I liked how we were seeing both sides, and I also saw a movie relatively recently. I think I brought it up in another podcast, but... It's
going to be Shrek the Third, isn't it? I just picture you watching dumb shit when I'm not around.
Okay.
To stop you.
Okay. No, it was... What's the name of the actor, or the director who did Irreversible and...
Gaspar Noé.
Yeah, one of his movies. I forget which one it was. It was
Lux Eterna was the short film?
Yes, yeah, that's
Because you brought that up kind of recently.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So that one's got this split screen as well, and it lasts for, like 10 minutes, and that's much too long. Whereas
everything Gaspar Noé is much too long, if you ask me.
Okay. Here, it only lasts for a couple minutes. It's done really well, but I kind of wish that we came back to one single screen when the cops and Grace show up at the apartment.
Yeah, they're still doing a split screen when they show. I'll just call him Emil, the ex-husband guy, when he's sneaking out and he sees them in the hallway. I think it's still two screens at that point.
It is, yeah. But there was one thing, like, I was kind of thinking as we were watching, why are they still doing a split screen? Now you have all the characters on screen. But then they do this really interesting shot where the cop is asking Danielle some questions, and Grace is behind the cop, and she leans in behind him to, like, whisper in his ear. I thought, oh, that's smart. And then kind of after that, like, as soon as they step into the apartment, it goes back to the
that was kind of like the last moment, I think. I was gonna ask, did they ever go back to that style? I don't think they did.
No.
Anyways, they confront the police, who are not happy with Grace, obviously, but they confront Margot Kidder, they confront Danielle at her apartment. She kind of stumbles through some English in possibly a way to sound more innocent. Like, she struggles to think of the term, like, search warrant and stuff. And, maybe that's genuine, maybe it's not. But she eventually lets them in. She's got nothing to hide. And they ask questions. And the cops are far more beating around the bush because they don't exactly know what they're looking for, as opposed to Grace is like, there was a man here last night. Like, what's he... They absolutely just let her... Well, they don't really let her, but she kind of just interrogates Danielle.
Yeah.
And she sneaks around the apartment too. You'd think they would want eyes on her at all times, but whatever. Because she just kind of hangs out in the bathroom for a bit. She's like looking at her medications.
Yeah, and then right after that scene, she comes out of the bathroom, and I think one of the cops says, "Hey, stick with us. Like, stop moseying around. Come on." Yeah,
and they check under the bed. They do all this stuff, and it's as the cops are, like, getting ready to leave, she goes and... Well, actually, first they go through the closet, and she notices every pair of clothes she has two sets. Mm-hmm. And she's like, why do you have all this stuff in pairs like you're twins? She has a perfectly reasonable answer. She's like, well, I'm a model. Sometimes, like, we'll wear this, and if it gets dirty, we'll just switch into the other thing.
I think that's a great excuse.
It is. It's perfectly reasonable. The follow-up question should have been... if you're a model, do you really own the clothes you shoot in? Because I think in most cases they don't.
Yeah, you're right.
It's as the cops are, like, apologizing and about to leave, Grace sneaks back in and goes into the fridge and finds a cake And the cake says, "Happy birthday, Dominique and Danielle." So she's like, oh my God, they are twins. She picks up the cake and she's bringing it to them, but then she trips over someone and the cake is smashed and it's unreadable. I kind of like this. This is like so predictable and kind of silly, but it's like, I like this. So now she knows what's up, or at least she thinks she does. But obviously no one's going to believe her because the cops, it was just a cake. Who knows? Was there blood on the cake too? Because it feels like there would have been, because she stabbed him leaning over the cake. There probably would have been some blood spurts on there.
But there wasn't. It was just, oh, hey, here's 2 names.
So, and at this point, has Emil come back?
Yes, he's come back in.
And they just say he's her husband, right?
Yeah.
She might say husband, not ex-husband this time. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. I like this next bit where Grace goes home and meets her mother.
We get some glimpses into Grace's personal life, and it's this sad, pathetic. I do this. This is what I'm talking about when I said the movie has these weird character things that add a lot of personality to the movie. Because so we've got a mystery film, and this is playing out a bit like a giallo, because giallo is mostly the people investigating aren't really the cops, and at this point it's going to be this reporter who's investigating because the cops don't give a shit. Mm-hmm. So that's where you think the movie's going to go, but then she has to go on this lunch date with her mom, and they're driving around, and her mom's being this bitch, and she's like, "When are you going to find a man?" And she's trying to set her up with someone, and
she's trying to give her hot tips for stories to write, for the paper.
Oh yeah, and the hot tips are they're building a restaurant near my neighborhood, and we don't I don't know how the zoning laws
work, and then she's she's like, oh, there's an insane asylum, and they're going to let all the crazies just walk and do whatever they want. They're going to let them walk around and be outside, and I don't feel comfortable in my own neighborhood.
It's foreshadowing, because we see an insane asylum later. If it's the same one, we don't know.
I think it is.
So Grace and her mother, they do stop at this bakery, and this is the scene we mentioned earlier, and she finds out the names, that it's Dominique and Danielle. Her newspaper isn't really letting her investigate this story, so she kind of goes about it on her own and hires a private investigator. This private investigator, I believe his name is Joseph Larch, and he's played by Charles Durning, who's an actor. I definitely recognize him, and it looks like he's had quite a career as a character actor. He's in The Sting, The Muppet Movie, Dog Day Afternoon, Tootsie, and he's a lot of fun. He's talking about his degree from the Private Detective University or the Private Detective Academy, whatever. Yeah. And it's you don't know if he's being serious about that or not. And he's got a revolving door of disguises for his van. At one point he's an electrical company. At one point he's something else.
Yeah, he's Acme window cleaners or something like that.
Yeah, that's it. No, and he's Ajax Extermination. So she hires him, and he gets into Danielle's apartment, and of course she can see him from across the street, so she's watching as he's doing this, and then when he's over there, Danielle and Emil arrive, so he has to hide, and I guess this is an exact recreation of a Rear Window scene, come to think of it, but there's the scene with Grace Kelly over in Raymond Burr's apartment. And, of course, we all know Grace Kelly has nothing to worry about in Raymond Burr's apartment if it's actually Raymond Burr, but because he was gay. I didn't think you got that, so I had to explain that. Yeah, so he, I guess, it kind of sneaks out through the window or something. We don't really see it. It's not that exciting of a scene. It feels like it should be.
Well, what happens is he goes in there, and originally the plan is to make sure that there are twins, right? And he says, okay, you call or something like that, and I'll go in. And if there's nobody in the apartment, if nobody answers, I'll go into the apartment and look around. Mm-hmm. And he goes in pretending to be a window cleaner, and he lifts all the shades, and he kind of shrugs his shoulders every time he looks through the window. Mm-hmm. Nothing's going on. There's no evidence. And then he opens a window and leans out with a black binder or a black...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he basically takes a big, we find out later, it's a case file. It's a newspaper story, but that they've kept.
Yeah. And then, you're right, they all come, Danielle and Emil come into the apartment. I don't remember if he hides, but he somehow comes out
Yeah, we don't see how he comes out. We see him like leaning out the window maybe of like the bathroom or something when she makes the phone call to kind of get Danielle to go to the phone, I guess to make him realize that he's not alone there. But we don't see how I'm assuming he gets out through the window. But at any rate, when he meets back up with her, he finds two things, really only one that interests him. And it ends up being not the thing that interests Grace, which is a little interesting and a little odd. But he's like, the body's definitely in the couch. Like, I tried moving it. It's way too heavy. The body's in the couch. And he also has that binder that you mentioned, and she looks through it.
As he's saying to her, yeah, the body's in the couch, there's a moving company taking the couch out of the apartment.
Taking it to Quebec. Yeah. They have to follow that. And then she looks through the binder, and she's like, oh, my God, this is it. This is a story about conjoined Siamese twins that were separated. And she's like, this is it. Danielle and Dominique. Dominique is the other sister. But yeah, he's not interested in that. He's just like, we got to follow the couch. It's going to Quebec. So they go back to Manhattan. They follow it on the ferry. In Manhattan, she goes to the newspaper that originally published that article, and she speaks to the author of it. And she basically says, we're doing a follow-up article. And he's like, oh, yeah? On what angle? And she's like, we don't know yet. So he just, like, shares with her all of the information that he has, that he remembers, and they watch a video that includes, there's this psychiatrist Orson Welles lookalike guy.
Yes.
Who's got, like, a German accent or something. He's not a psychologist, I suppose I should say. He's a conjoined twin doctor. I don't know what his deal is, but he's like, yeah, these Dominique and Danielle are very unique. They're conjoined, and we're going to separate them. And then he's going into the personalities of the two of them. I have in my notes that they mentioned that Dominique is kind of crazy, but later on when we kind of revisit this scene, I think they reverse it and they say it's Danielle. So I don't know if my notes are incorrect.
No, you're right. I think in this footage, they say that the two twins have, like, very different temperament. Mm-hmm. Danielle's very nice, outgoing, kind, talkative, and Dominique is very closed in, shut off.
Disturbed, I think is the word.
Yes, but I think in the video, I think you're right, because then later on, Emile, is that his name?
Yeah, we see him in the video. He's like one of the doctors or the orderlies there, and she's like, oh my God, that's Danielle's husband. Yeah. And the guy watching the video with her, the newspaper, the other journalist, is just like, what? I don't know what you're talking about.
Later on, we hear, I think Emile says something along the lines of, people think Dominique is the crazy one, but really it's Danielle, or something like that. So some character says it, like, she seems to be the crazy one, but it's actually Danielle who's the crazy one.
I don't remember if it's the video, or if it's like an article, or if it's the journalist himself, but there's mention that Dominique supposedly died on the operating table.
The journalist fella says, hey, there's these two conjoined twins. One of them died on the operating table. Because the problem is they were conjoined at the hip, but for some reason their spines were also conjoined, is what they said, making it very difficult to operate.
Well, also, why was the article such a big deal? Was this like the first separation of conjoined twins or something? Was there something like that?
They were born in 1948,
of adults, maybe?
And they were the first conjoined twins in Canada.
Oh,
that's what this journalist fella said.
Okay.
So then Grace says, well, hey...
They just throw on a little bit of blackface and they can be elected prime minister.
Yeah. So then I think at this point Grace says, well, I have to find out more. And I think she goes to the mental hospital that her mother had mentioned earlier.
Well, she doesn't really go there. She follows them there.
She trails them. But she knows which mental hospital she was in. Because originally, though, the mental hospital that like the video was from... was in Quebec.
Yes, that's a different
Loisel Hospital or something. But they've been moved down here to New York.
So she's kind of hanging out and spying on them, and then she kind of gets some crazy guy who's like trimming the bushes
at midnight.
Who's clearly a patient. Starts talking to her, and he's not at all bothered by her just sneaking around. And she's like, "Oh, I need to use a phone. Can I go inside?" And he tells her where it is, and she goes in there. And then there's another crazy lady that freaks out because she's going to use the phone and insists that germs can go through the wires, and that's the reason why she's sick. And she's like, "You can't use the phone." And she's like, got this big, spray can of Lysol or whatever.
This actress, by the way, is fantastic in this little bit that she does.
She's good, yeah. It's a small part.
Her face, she also, like, for any fans out there, she looks like a Titan from Attack on Titan. Like her face when she's like crying and grinning at the same time. It's very creepy.
So there's like an orderly that diffuses the situation, and Grace is like, okay, someone here has murdered someone. Like, we need to do something. And then the orderly goes and gets the doctor, who is, of course, Emile. And Emile insists that she's a patient. And they, like, lock her away. And he keeps
This is
doing
one of my biggest fears ever, by the way.
Sure. And there's a Psych episode about this. And they do he does this thing where he says that she is, like, someone else. And I can't remember the name. It's, like, Marie or something.
Yeah, I don't
Not really
remember.
that important. But they drug her. This is where the movie gets quite confusing, because there is a hallucination. But in this hallucination, we also learn the truth. And, of course, it should be noted that Emile, in addition to drugging Grace, is also hypnotizing her into saying over and over again that there is no murder.
Mm-hmm.
So in this hallucination nightmare, which is shot in black and white, and it's pretty absurdist, because not only do we have Dominique and Danielle, of course, but it's like an entire hospital of conjoined people, because there's like 3 people like connected side by side who are like jumping around and dancing.
And then there's like other people, like a guy with like 2 really tiny arms.
Yeah, there's some weird stuff going on here.
Yeah.
It's like it's a weird combination of, you have Grace who's drugged and is dreaming this, but then there's also like, she's next to Danielle in bed, I think, and it's also like partially being explained to Danielle, I think. It's kind of odd, but it's revealed that Danielle, in addition to the scars on her hip, has scars like all over her stomach. And it's because, as we soon learn, her sister stabbed her there. So what happened was Emile, who, we've already known as a creep, turns out to be a big-time creep, was having sex with Danielle, but of course that's difficult to do with the conjoined twins, so he would like start drugging Dominique so that they could be uninterrupted. And Danielle eventually got pregnant, and when Dominique found out about that, she flipped out and stabbed Danielle, which killed the unborn baby. Mm-hmm. And then they did the separation surgery, and Dominique died on the operating table, possibly deliberately. At least I kind of assume.
Well, definitely deliberately. I want to say 2 things about that. One, certainly deliberately, because Danielle asks Emile, "Am I going to be okay?" And he says, and I quote, "Yes, you will be fine." And he says it like that. You will be fine. Also, I love how, he's got the surgery set up, and he's got like the little square where he's going to perform the surgery, and then he's just handed this giant fucking meat cleaver, which is like twice the size of the square.
Yeah, now here's the thing. That part, again, there's some truth there. That was hallucination, though, because the first person to hold the meat cleaver was Larch, and it's like, why is he there? Like, that's obviously part of the nightmare.
Yeah, I just thought it was a great visual, and it was kind of funny.
Sure. Well, it is absurd, if not funny. It's definitely absurd. So Dominique dies during surgery. Danielle then creates a split personality that sort of emerges. The Dominique personality, the crazy, violent personality, emerges when Danielle has a sexual experience or encounter, i.e. the scratches on Philip, i.e. the murder of Philip, and i.e. what's about to go on here, because Emile kisses Danielle, and then she snaps and just kills him.
Yeah, which is interesting, because she picks up like this scalpel, and she cuts him in the leg, and I think that's it, and then he just dies.
He bleeds to death, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. All while, by the way, Grace is laying on the bed.
Sure.
Unconscious.
Yeah.
And they're literally on top of her.
So then the cops arrest Danielle, and then the one of the police officers from earlier is speaking to Grace, and she's like, hey, he's like, hey, you were onto something, we figured out what's going on. Still don't have the body yet, but like, obviously Danielle is a murderer. And then she just keeps insisting there was no murder. She's still under that hypnotic spell, and that's her thing. And it's like, they like argue. It's like, well, why'd you make it up then if there's no murder? And she's like, I don't know, but there wasn't a murder, trust me. And then, very last scene of the movie, kind of an odd way to end it. There's a very, very odd way to end it. Because at this point we have some closure almost all of the closure we need at this point in the movie. But then we see at a rural train station in Canada, we see the couch.
Very rural.
Yeah, the couch just like sitting there, and there's like a tractor pulling up, and then we see... Yeah, and a cow. And then we see Joseph Larch pretending to be a telephone repairman. He's just up there watching it. And that is how the movie ends. Jim, we are going to talk about the ending, but I suppose if you want to start with the ending, you can do that. But otherwise, just what did you think of Sisters?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was weird and kind of crazy, but that's what I like.
It's the 1970s, like man. It's the decade of weird, off-the-wall horror movies.
Yeah, and I also thought like all of the actors in it were fine, totally serviceable. The standouts for me
I think
like,
many are considerably better than just serviceable. I think
no, exactly. But okay. I think like there's like 3 standouts for me specifically.
Cake Dick,
the fellow who plays Larch.
Okay.
The mom. Of Grace, and then Grace herself, I think.
Okay, so no love for Margot Kidder?
I do like...
You're just throwing her to the wolves right now?
No. Boom, got her. No, I mean, I think she's great as well. But those 3 actors were very interesting to watch.
Yeah, Larch might
have been beautiful to watch.
Larch might have been my favorite. That's Charles Durning again. It's not a huge role, but he's just very fun. I agree.
And it's also just, like, interesting because the movie was taking all kinds of twists that I definitely did not expect. And then also it added one of my largest fears ever, and that's being told I'm a crazy person and being drugged and put in an insane asylum.
It's not so much you being told you're a crazy person, but someone telling other people that you're a crazy person and then just locking you away. Like, someone can tell you're crazy and you can just get on with your life, but, you know.
Yeah, but if I'm in an asylum and they tell me I'm crazy and everybody else says, oh yeah, you are crazy. That's the worst.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I like it quite a bit. It's weird. It's no Basket Case. Basket Case will forever be the greatest film about formerly conjoined and now separated twins. It's one of the best films ever made. I keep mentioning Basket Case whenever it's relevant. It's good. I like the directing style. I think there's definitely Psycho in its split personality stuff, and particularly the scene where Danielle speaks to her twin sister kind of off screen, and we see the shadows, and it's like, okay, now we know that's not exactly as that information was originally presented to us. That's very Psycho. But I do think the movie is unique and has its own voice enough where you're not distracted by the Hitchcock stuff. Mm-hmm. All that having been said, why does the movie end the way it does? The story's over. Do we need to see Larch still following the couch? It's almost funny, and I don't think it's meant to be funny, but it's like, why? It's like, are we setting up for a sequel with this couch? What is happening? You know what it is? It's, again, Psycho. So Psycho, the movie ends, there's a resolution of the story, but they still don't have the body. Mm-hmm. The very last shot of Psycho is them pulling the car out from the swamp. Is this their version of that? Where it's just yes, we just give us 10 seconds and we'll find the body, you know?
I guess so, but I mean, at the ending of this movie, I mean, they already have the body of Emile.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but that's its own unique murder, though.
Yeah, but she's definitely going to prison or being locked away or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just an odd way to end. I was just thinking maybe that's kind of they're doing a Psycho pulling the car out from the swamp thing. I'm not really sure.
Well,
and also I said, like, let's talk about the weird ending, and we focused on the very last 30 seconds of the movie, which are odd. But how about the other part of the ending where she's just hypnotized? That's weird. Hypnosis is so, I don't know, it's kind of a bullshit way to end, or not to end, but just like as it's like a storytelling excuse. It's just like, oh, she no longer believes this, and yeah. But like regardless, like at that point it doesn't matter if she believes it or not, because the police are onto it, at least in some way.
And I think even the cop says, we know the body is in the couch, we're just looking for the couch now. And then also too, I mean, Grace, other than making the cops aware of the murder, had nothing to do with actually stopping Emile and Danielle.
Well, sure, and that begs the question of, like, if Emile knows the violent personality comes out when she has this kind of sexual experience, why does he then go in for a smooch? Like, you're just going to get stabbed, dude. or scratched at the very least.
I'm unsure of why it ended the way it did, but it kind of adds to the whole movie being weird anyways. And I'm fine with that. It's a weird 70s horror mystery, and I'm totally okay with it.
But yeah, it's definitely a good movie. I think the acting's quite good. I think if I have a complaint, and even though I liked Jennifer Salt and all the stuff she's doing, I guess, come to think of it, this is kind of my complaint with Psycho, but the movie does go down a little, it goes a little downhill after that scene where they're hiding the body and then the police and Grace come and ask questions. It's just it's a different movie at that point, and I don't think it's as good.
I was going to say it turns into a thriller, but I guess that's kind of what it was from the beginning.
Yeah, this is, I mean, not that we need to distinguish, but this is probably more thriller than horror. There's like 2 horror scenes probably. All right, well, good movie. Check it out. It's, it's not one of Brian De Palma's best necessarily. It's no Body Double. Body Double is one of the best things I've ever seen.
But there are 2 bodies in this movie.
Yeah, but one's white, one's black. They couldn't double for each other.
Or there are 2 bodies that were conjoined in this movie.
Oh. Jim, do you want to get us started with Women's Prison, which is potentially where Danielle is on her way to?
Oh, she's definitely there. Well, maybe
no, she's probably going to stay in the same place she's always been, the insane asylum.
Yeah, so Women's Prison, 1955, directed by Louis Seiler. Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know.
You think I know?
This person. No. You had said that this was like an ensemble cast, and it is. There's lots of people I've never heard of. I have never...
Some familiar faces for me. And as you know, Jim, and some of our listeners might know, I'm a huge fan of the Twilight Zone. Mm-hmm. There were 3 Twilight Zone actors here. Ida Lupino, who I mentioned is basically the first successful female director in Hollywood. She was also an actress. She's the warden here. She's top billed, but not necessarily that huge of a role. She stars in a Twilight Zone episode, The 16mm Shrine. She also directed one later on. The Doctor, Howard Duff is his name. He has one of the saddest, most pathetic faces I've ever seen.
Yeah, he always looks sad.
He's a very sad-looking man, and that works perfectly for the Twilight Zone episode. He's in A World of Difference, where he is a businessman who becomes very confused when he discovers that his entire life is like a movie set. And it's a little Truman Show-ish, if you will.
Oh, I think I've seen that.
Kind of just like loses his mind, and he's got those like sad, pathetic eyes the entire time, and it's a very empathetic performance. And then was it Warren Stevens? It was one of the other men. Oh, the husband character.
Oh yeah, Glenn, whatever his name is.
Warren Stevens. Definitely recognized him from Forbidden Planet. I think he's Leslie Nielsen's right-hand man in that. But I believe he's on the Twilight Zone as well. I'm trying to think of what... Dead Man's Shoes. Okay, not one of the better episodes necessarily. But yeah, so 3 Twilight Zone actors. A couple women who at least had recognizable names to me. Jan Sterling, I feel like I've heard of. She's Brenda. She's like the seasoned prisoner who gets let back in. She's kind of fun. Helene Jensen, played by Phyllis Thaxter. That's another one of the saddest faces I've ever seen.
Oh my God, it's just depressing.
She's Martha Kent in the 1978 Superman. Not that I would have recognized her, obviously. And then, was it Cleo Moore? Yeah, Cleo Moore is gorgeous. She plays one of the blondes.
Oh, okay.
She plays May. She received comparisons in her day to Diana Dors, Anita Ekberg, Mamie Van Doren, Marilyn Monroe, Jane Mansfield, is like that kind of era of the blonde bombshells. I don't think she's as successful as any of them, but I've heard of her, I think, and that's it. But yeah, definitely an ensemble cast. Not a poorly acted film.
No.
I don't know if there was any great performances. I liked the woman that was I liked how they didn't call her a stripper. She was a strip teaser. I enjoyed her.
Yes, yeah, and she was doing all kinds of like.
Oh, hang on, Juanita Moore, who plays the black woman, Polly Jones. I know that name. Yeah, she's She was up for an Oscar. I don't know if it was what it was for, but yeah, I know this name.
Well, thank you, because again, I knew nobody. This is an interesting movie because I think it takes a couple turns. From the get-go, you think it's going to be about this woman, Helene, but quickly you realize, and by quickly I mean after about the first 20 minutes, you realize it's not going to be about her, really.
Yeah, now, and Helene's story is that, we're introduced to her. She clearly doesn't belong in prison. Numerous characters comment on that, including Polly, played by Juanita Moore. She's not really a criminal. She just
killed a kid with her car.
Exactly. Matthew Broderick didn't serve time, so why should she?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an accident, is her thing. And then the warden basically... The warden's thing is she treats everyone like shit. Doesn't care about any nuances. Everyone is equal, whether you're a hardened criminal like a serial killer or just someone who
or an accidental criminal
fucked up once, and she's going to treat you like shit. And so early on in the movie, you're right, it does seem like it's going to be about Helene, or Helene, I think is how they pronounce it in the movie. So she's like throwing her in solitary and stuff, and she's like going crazy, but that's kind of
Yeah, and we're introduced to this prison. This is massive prison complex.
It's not even a women's prison. The title's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's they've got a divider, but it's a women's prison and a men's prison combined.
Exactly, and it's divided by a wall or a series of walls.
There's a gate or two. I mean, we learn it's not that difficult to get from one to the other.
But yeah, so we're introduced to Helene when she's brought to prison, and Brenda. And like you said, Brenda's this kind of repeat offender who's been
Brenda's a lot of fun. I enjoy especially the early scenes with Brenda, where she's just like, oh, you follow me, I know what I'm doing here, and just like the way she talks and stuff is very like 1950s, just kind of fun. I'm a hardened criminal, but I'm a hardened criminal in the 1950s, and I kind of enjoy life in prison.
Yeah. Well, when they're booking both of these women in, Brenda goes to walk away, and this woman who's, taking their information and clothes and whatever, she says, oh, you're wearing your earrings. And Brenda turns around, she says, wear them with green, honey. They did wonders for me.
Yeah, she's great.
Well, then over the next 10 odd minutes or so, we're kind of introduced to a whole slew of characters, of female prisoners. We meet Polly, she's cleaning at the time, and then this is kind of like the first inklings of the story moving off of Helene, and there's a men's paint detail coming into the women's side of the prison to paint, like the front officers or something. But the whole detail gets turned around when they realize that there's this prisoner named Glenn who has snuck onto the detail because he wants to get onto the other side to see his wife, Joan.
This comes later, but the only reason she's in prison is because they found her with his guns or something. Like, he's the only one that's really a criminal. At least that's what he insists.
What was it? He robbed a place. There was what was it? Like, robbed a bank or something? There's money involved. I don't remember. After this men's painting details turned away, we're introduced to Dr. Crane, who's in the warden's office. So there's two wardens. We have the warden of the men's pen and the warden of the womenn's pen.
The human basset hound himself.
That's exactly it.
Howard Duff. Yes. He looks so sad. He's just got the saddest eyes. Look at his Wikipedia page. He looks like he's on the verge of tears.
Hold on, I'm going to look it up. Give me a second.
Howard Duff is his name. It's just like, what's wrong with him?
Yeah,
who hurt him? Also, I didn't realize this. I'm just learning. He was married to Ida Lupino. For over 30 years. They were married when this movie came out. That's interesting because he hates her in this movie. And she hates him, I guess. But
does she? Or does he? I didn't...
Well, yeah, no, because he's the doctor. This is a bit of a cliche in a lot of these prison movies, but the warden is this bitch. And it's usually the doctor that recognizes that and then also kind of wins the sympathy of the prisoners, just because he's not he might be employed by the state, but he's not.
Well, because doctors are all about healing and helping.
Unless you're Emil.
Yeah. Then you're about raping and murdering.
I don't know if he raped. He definitely drugged. There was a little Bill Cosby going on, but.
So anyway, we're introduced to Dr. Crane, the human basset hound. He's in the warden's office when he gets a call about this new inmate, Helene, who's in a state of shock. So he goes to the women's side, meets her, and she's in prison, which I love this term. You know, she runs over this kid with her car by accident, and she's in prison for 1 to 10 years. What a weird... Seems like an odd length of time. Yeah, you could be out of here in a year, or you could be out of here in a decade. Who knows? But Dr. Crane kind of realizes, as you've said earlier, that she's really not made for this. It was a total accident. And she's really struggling here. And he's trying to make it easier on her. He says, look, they're going to find work for you. People are going to help you get along. You're going to make friends. And then you have this female warden, Van Zant, I think that's her name, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. So Van Zant would probably be a Dutch name, but a lot of these prison movies, and maybe I'm thinking the true exploitation ones of like the 70s and the 80s, but the wardens would very frequently be German, I think, as like a Nazi thing. And the Van Zant, It's kind of getting there, although I do think it would be Dutch.
Towns Van Zant, that's who I was thinking of.
Towns Van Zant. Well, what about Little Stevie? Stephen Van Zant of the E Street Band and of the Sopranos fame. Stevie. Little Stevie, that's his name. When he on his classic rock, like garage rock radio show.
Yeah, so Van Zant, she's pretty unimpressed by Helene, and the doctor kind of reiterates to her, like, hey, look, she doesn't belong here, she's got a good background, just go easy on her. But Van Zant's like, fuck that. She's a prisoner? Mm-hmm. She killed somebody, she's under my thumb now, I can do whatever I want, treat her how I want. And I think it's like the first night that she's there, so like Brenda and Helene are in cells next to each other. And Helene starts freaking out her first night. She's crying. It's finally setting in that she's actually in prison behind bars. And Brenda's in the next cell, and she's kind of trying to calm her down. But the guards are alerted to her freaking out. And Van Zant shows up and says, put her in a straitjacket and haul her into the solitary cell for the night. The next morning, Helene is found totally unconscious in her padded cell. Like, she won't wake up. She seems to be in sort of like a comatose state. And one of these, like, nicer jailers, she brings her to Dr. Crane. Dr. Crane, who's appalled by the way Helene has been treated, he calls up Van Zant, and he's like, hey, what you're doing here is inhumane. It's barbaric. Don't ever put her in a straitjacket or isolation again. She's very frail. She's a fragile, lovely woman who doesn't belong in here.
You know who they should put in the strip or in the straitjacket is the strip teaser, and see if she can get out of it.
Oh my god, yeah, like she could Harry Houdini that.
The strip teaser / impressionist. I don't know if those are good impressions or not, because they're very 1950s impressions.
Yeah, they're very outdated. I don't know who any of them are.
Betty Davis was pretty good. But then she did this other one, and she didn't say who it was, and the others just knew who it was, and was like, well, fuck me, I don't know who that is. I wasn't around in 1955. That could be anyone.
I know. Well, then she does an impression, and like, she says something like, who is that? And the woman's like, oh, it's so-and-so. And Helene's like, oh, of course. And Brenda's like, oh, of course, we all knew who it was, dear. You did a great job. You did a great impression.
I got to stop for one more note of casting. I did not recognize this woman. I'm not 100% sure who the character is, but I was going to comment that though the warden is pretty ruthless, a lot of the not necessarily the guards, but like just some of the people there are just... But yeah, I guess it's the guards, like, are absolute bitches. Like the one who cut off Helene's time with her husband because she touched the...
Oh, she's a real CNX.
Yeah, and this might be who she is, because these were kind of older women. And this woman, Mae Clark, plays Matron Saunders. Mae Clark, we've seen on this podcast before. She is Elizabeth in the Boris Karloff Frankenstein. So she is the fiancée. Wow. And then also she's in The Public Enemy, where she gets a grapefruit shoved in her fucking face by James Cagney. Probably one of the more famous scenes in motion picture history. So I don't know what she did other than those two movies in this, but because they recast her in Bride of Frankenstein, I believe. Obviously, this comes out in the 1950s. It's funny to me that these movies are not super racy, and yet the posters are also not super racy, but they're racier than the movie. I'm looking at the poster for this. Got Ida Lupino in the corner. We got a couple photos of Cleo Moore that appear to just be kind of modeling photos. And there's a woman in like a negligee that kind of looks like it'd be like Marilyn Monroe. It's like no one wears anything like that in this movie. And I don't know, yeah, they're selling you on some skin in this movie. And it's again,
yeah, and there's
maybe this was considered super sexy in 1955. Who knows?
Sensational scandal rocks women's prison.
Yeah.
Reveal Love Nest Alley.
Yeah. Listen, this is before, I always joke that Madonna invented sex, but that really doesn't work when we've talked about the Emmanuelle movies. But this is before either Madonna or Emmanuelle invented sex, so it's a different era.
Actually, this poster gives more of a hint of what this movie's actually about than the first 20-odd minutes. So after Helene's pulled out of isolation, Brenda kind of shows her the ropes, and we get this kind of like little montage of just days going by and lining up in lines and getting food at the cafeteria, whatever. And 15 days passes, and Helene gets to see her husband in the visiting area, or whatever it is. And there's a big metal screen that separates the visitors from the prisoners. But immediately, you'd think 15 days would kind of mellow her out in prison a bit, but immediately Helene starts freaking out.
What the hell do you know about prison? What do we know? How could we say that?
But she's got Brenda and some friends, and hopefully, she was mellowing out a bit.
That's worth noting, by the way. The prisoners all kind of get along. There's no like gangs or anything, and maybe this is just like the women in prison movies I've seen are, far more exploitative, and they're from the 70s and 80s. But there's like always, the women are always like fighting, and then there's always like, there's nothing like that here.
They're all listening to impressions and giggling and doing laundry together.
Strip teasing.
Yeah.
I can't get over that. I can't get over that. That's obviously where stripper came from, the word stripper, but it's just so funny to hear it.
Yeah, and it's funny to hear it said from a movie in 1955, when all these women they're all attractive, but they're all covered up. They're not wearing...
The strip teaser might be the least attractive one, honestly.
Yeah. I feel like I'd have a terrible date with her, She'd give me a headache by the end of it.
With the impressions? I don't know, if she's still doing Bette Davis impressions in 2024, yeah, that might not be the best date in the world.
Yeah, would you rather her do Bette Davis impressions and tell you that they're Bette Davis impressions, or have her do impressions and make you
recognize
guess?
The Bette Davis. I did. I think that was some All About Eve lines in there.
Yeah, but like, how would if you're on a date with her and she's like, "Yeah, I'm going to do like 5 impressions," and you got to guess who they are, but you don't know any of them.
They're all from the 50s. There's just Jane Wyman and. Natalie Wood. I don't know. Yeah, that might not be the best.
Yeah. But yeah, so you'd think, Helene would kind of acclimate to life in prison a bit. She might be a little more okay with her situation after 30 days in the clink. But she sees her husband, she immediately kind of starts freaking out, yelling at him, "You have to get me out of here, it's terrible in here, it's awful." And she grabs the cage twice. And the guard in there says, "Your visiting time is over." And Helene's like, "What? It just started."
It was over the second you touched that divider.
Exactly. She's like, "You know the rules. Get out." And Helene screams, "You must get me out." Mr. Jensen, I think, he visits Van Zandt. And he's like, "Hey, what have you done to my wife? She's a nervous wreck. You're destroying her in here." And Van Zandt says, "She's a borderline psychopath."
Yeah. Oh, was that the husband? I thought that maybe this was the doctor having this conversation with her, but no, maybe you're right.
Yeah, because I think the husband came in, and then
oh no, you're right, because he's like, "Well, what are you talking about? She's nothing like that." And he's like, she's like, "Well, maybe you never notice it when you're married, but lots of times isolation can bring this out of people. Like if it was always there."
Yes, yeah, but putting them in a straitjacket and locking them in padded cells can bring this out in people. There's also a great line. So this is right before the movie kind of switches tracks here. Helene's thrown back into isolation under Van Zandt's orders, and Dr. Crane confronts her about this. He's like, I'm paraphrasing here, but he's like, "You're jealous of her. You're jealous of all the women in this prison. They're all feminine and attractive, and they're trying to still be women behind bars, but you're a cold-hearted bitch who's never felt love or learned about love. Well, every other woman in here has, and they have something to live for, and you don't have any of that." It's a pretty great scene. Though, again, he doesn't call her a cold-hearted bitch. But
and it's also not accurate, because she's married to the doctor in real life.
Yes, yeah, you're right.
Well, actually, that might be a pretty love. You've seen how sad he looks. Maybe that is a pretty lovely.
He's like, "You're a cold-hearted bitch." Do you think when they divorced, he just regurgitated that little speech from this movie?
I feel like she left him.
No love.
Feel like she left him. He was too sad to take action.
So here we see all the women working in the laundry room, and I think we're probably introduced to Joan earlier in the movie. So Joan is the one who's married to Glenn, that guy who at the beginning tried to sneak over to the women's side on the paint detail to see his wife. And In the laundry room, he has somehow snuck onto the women's side again, and he's hid in, like, this laundry storage room. And Joan walks in and finds her husband. And they share this loving embrace, and he says, hey, all the money that I took, I've hid it under the stairs of your mother's house. Your parole's coming up. When you get out, go there. All the money will be there, and, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And Brenda walks into the room with, like, a bunch of clothes, and she's startled because they're in there making out now. She drops all the clothes, and she comes back out, and the guard who's in the room says, like, hey, that was pretty klutzy of you. You've never been a klutz. What's going on? And she's like, oh, nothing.
And also, like yeah, in the movie, they're just making out because this is the 1950s, but they are fucking, like, in the story.
100%. Like, he has been sneaking across the divide to bang his wife for God knows how long. And you definitely know that they're going at it, going to town in this storage room here.
Can you hold it for a second? I need to make a joke, but I have to look something up.
Yes.
He is absolutely entering the distant planet Altair 4, I'll tell you that.
You're such an idiot.
It's just the name of the planet in Forbidden Planet. I had to look it up. I'm sorry. I wasn't ready. I should have been ready.
That was pretty good. I like that. Yeah, Jones, you know, given to her, you know, in the laundry room, storage room. And to distract the guard from going into the room, Brenda, it's awful. I felt the pain in my hand when she did it. She seared her hand on like an industrial iron and screams to distract the guard from walking in, which that's a good friend, you know?
No kidding. Yeah, like, yeah.
But
I wouldn't burn my hand for you, Jim.
No, and you know what, Patrick? I love you, buddy. I'll do many things for you, but I would 100% not do that for you.
That reminds me of something in the novel Sula by Toni Morrison. I had my students were reading this not too long ago, and Sula, the character, when she's like 10, 12 years old, she cuts off part of her finger, and she does this to like stick up for her friend who was being bullied and harassed by some kids. And I was talking to my students about this, and I was like, okay, so if a friend does this, like, what's your reaction? And they're all like, oh, well, that's my best friend in the world. And it's like, no, you don't get it. She cut off her fucking finger. She didn't need to do that. Wouldn't you be freaked out?
Yeah,
wouldn't you
like,
be
what the fuck is wrong with you?
the makings of a jigsaw killer? Like, and then wouldn't you be disturbed? I don't know.
You know what? If it was like, if you were stuck in like some weird like Chinese finger trap device.
Well, yeah, and it was nothing like that.
She
Sula cuts off her finger to be like to these boys, hey, if I could do this to me, what could I do to you? And they're just like, okay, we'll leave her alone, I guess. Like,
yeah, that's the makings of a serial killer.
Yeah, exactly. Some students picked up on that, but not as many as I would have liked.
How many kids do you think are going to come to your class missing parts of their fingers in the next couple months?
This was a couple months ago we read this, so I think we're in the clear.
Good.
We're reading A Streetcar Named Desire now, and we were watching the Marlon Brando movie as well, and some of my students were asking me, like, was he considered, like, good-looking in his day? And I'm like, oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, in the 50s, he was a heartthrob, and I said, like, there'd be, like, thirst traps about him all over TikTok. One of them opened up TikTok and immediately found one.
Oh, that's pretty good. I thought he was sexiest in...
The Freshman?
No.
Apocalypse Now?
Thank you.
Superman, when he's drunk out of his fucking mind?
I thought he was sexiest in The Island of Dr.
Yeah, I was going to get there, yeah.
I love that white face paint.
Now, there was a news story I saw recently. I don't know if it was like some biographer or something, but there was just like a pull quote, and this made the news. Like someone said Marlon Brando would fuck anything that moved back in the day, and I'm like, well, eventually he ate anything that moved too, but.
Patrick, that's one of the funniest things you've said. Honestly, that's amazing. Oh, I gotta bring my volume back up here. I laughed too loud. Well, going back to things that aren't funny, Joan, she gets back to work, and she passes out. And the doctor then has to inform the warden, and the lady warden, Van Zant, that Joan's pregnant. She got pregnant in prison. The doctor has to
stab
break
her
the
in
news.
the womb like in Sisters.
Dr. Crane, he breaks the news to both wardens, and Joan breaks the news to Brenda.
I like the little rivalry between the two wardens, by the way. It's not a huge part of the movie, but there's definitely, like, you need to get control of your fucking men so they're not coming over here to impregnate my women kind of thing.
Well, and then also, too, like, Van Zant, she had a sign on her office that said superintendent. So I technically don't even know if she's the warden. So from here on out, the movie just becomes this drama revolving around Joan and her husband. And the warden calls in Glenn. He's like, hey, I need to know how you got to the other side, how you keep getting over there.
The male warden, that guy.
And Glenn's like, well, I'm not telling you. And the male warden says, well, if you don't, we can take away the possibility of parole for your wife. And she's pregnant, so, you'd rather have her have a baby on the outside. Glenn kind of hits back at him with, well, if you do that, every man will be making trips over to the women's side of the penitentiary without you knowing, and you'll have bigger problems on your hands. Van Zant, it's her job, because the male warden Brock, has threatened to fire her if she doesn't find out how Glenn got across. So her job is to interrogate Joan. Unfortunately for Joan, she has no idea. Glenn would just show up, kind of out of thin air. And
he came in a spaceship. Leslie Nielsen brought him here.
Oh, stop it. In the middle... Well, was it in the middle of the night by any chance? Van Zant is interrogating Joan, and she's yelling at her, and she's like, how did Glenn get over here? And Joan, who literally has no idea, she doesn't know how he showed up. And she's said that to Van Zant multiple times, but she doesn't believe her. And she just starts mercilessly and relentlessly beating Joan to the point where she beats her unconscious. And the doctor has to rush in and save her and bring her to the infirmary. While Joan's being beaten, though, all the female prisoners can hear this. And they all wake up in the middle of the night, and they kind of start a bit of a riot just by screaming and, clinking cans on bars and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a very mild riot.
So the next morning, all the women are, their cells are opened, and they come out for their lineup, and they're going to march to the mess hall. And they're ordered to, but they refuse, based on how Joan was treated. And I think by this point, they all know that Joan's in the infirmary. So they're just sent straight back into their cells. And Van Zant says, well, send them to work without breakfast then, if that's how they want to act. And they do a similar thing when they get to work, as in the laundry room. They show up and they just stand in front of the machines and they refuse to work. So they're all sent back to their cells. This is now, we get like an action prison break. And then also, I should point out too, Helene is non-existent in the movie at this point.
Yeah, she's in solitary maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
no, but you're right.
She's pretty much been written out of the movie. That night, a couple of the women break out of their cells. And I think it's Brenda and some other lady. And they get out by tricking a guard into opening the cell because this one woman's faking an illness.
I think it's May.
Yeah, because she's the other blonde one, right? But Brenda holds this guard at shank point. These two women take the guard's keys, and they kind of round up all the guards, gag them, take their clothes, and throw them into a cell. And I think there's three of them. It's like Brenda, May, and somebody else. They trick their way into Van Zant's office by pretending to be one of the guards on the phone, and Van Zant just kind of lets them in. And again, they hold her at shank point, and they ask to be like taken to all the weapons. And Van Zant's like, I can't do that. And while all this is going on, while this like little prison break riot thing is going on, Glenn slips back onto the women's side, and he finds Joan in the infirmary with Dr. Kane. Is that it? No, Crane.
Dr. Martin Luther King, yeah. This is the Birmingham prison, of course.
And, unfortunately for Glenn here, Joan dies right in front of him. And there's this kind of like moving scene where Joan is kind of planning their life together outside of prison and her life with their unborn kid. She's like, I'm going to get out. I'm going to have this baby. Everything's going to be okay. We'll be waiting for you. And then she just passes away. So on learning that Joan has died, Brenda and all the others pull Van Zant in front of all the other women prisoners. And at which point, at this point, they've all been like let out of their cells. They're threatening to kill Van Zant. And the doctor shows up. And he's pleading with them. He's like, don't kill her. You're going to stoop to her level.
This is only going to make it worse, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, and if you kill her, you'll never get out of here. He kind of says that she is a shitty person and she will get what she deserves, but you gotta spare her. You can't go down this road. But at the same time, Glenn whips out this pistol, and he starts looking for Van Zant, and he runs into the men's warden and a bunch of guards, and they start shooting at each other. And I think the male prison guards, they start shooting like smoke bombs, and Glenn runs into the women's wing, and they just start firing all these smoke bombs, and all the women freak out and run back into their cells, and Van Zant kind of escapes. she locks herself in the padded cell, and as Glenn is looking for her, he gets shot in the back of the leg by one of the guards. But he does eventually make his way to Van Zandt and opens the door, and he's about to shoot her, but the doctor stops him. And interestingly here, I really like this scene. Van Zandt has like this mental breakdown in this padded cell.
Mm-hmm.
She says to Glenn, "If you better put that gun down, your wife is never going to get out of here."
Yeah, she's got a chance for parole right now, and it's like, what? She's dead, but whatever.
Exactly. And Glenn looks up and just says, like, she's dead. Like, I've essentially got nothing to lose. But Van Zandt just starts rambling on and saying, nobody here respects me. I'll stop every one of you. None of you are getting out of here, you know. And the doctor and Glenn and everybody in the room there kind of realizes that she's gone crazy. And Dr. Crane orders a straitjacket for her. The doctor, at the next day...
Do you think his first name is Fraser or Niles?
I made that joke with a buddy that I was watching this movie with, and I said Niles. You
watched this movie with someone?
Yeah, I watched both these movies.
I don't think I could get someone to watch this movie with me. It's just like, it's women's prison from 1955, and they're like, what?
Well, it was this kind of a compelling drama.
Yeah, really. It's not a bad movie. It's just like, it's not, if you think of like great 50s crime movies or like noir, it's not up there with those.
No, I mean, it's not as interesting.
It's not The Big Sleep.
No, I mean, it's not as interesting as Sisters either.
It's not On the Waterfront,
Yeah, you're saying things I haven't heard of, but I believe you.
You've never heard of On the Waterfront?
No.
Are you actually being serious?
I swear to God.
It's like one of the most famous movies ever.
Oh,
it's
no.
Marlon Brando, Ava Marie Saint.
No.
I Could Have Been a Contender. Nothing?
Oh, yeah, I know that.
Okay, but, Jesus.
I know that line, but
it's from On the Waterfront. It's like the most famous movie ever.
Well, I'll have to look it up later.
Academy Award winner for Best Picture of 1954.
Oh, wow. The year before this movie came out.
Exactly, yeah. Everyone was riding that On the Waterfront high as they went to the theater to see Cleo Moore and that strip teaser.
Yeah. Stop saying that. Well, this movie's come to an end because the doctor quits. He had promised he was going to quit earlier after this whole issue with Joan was cleared up, after she passed away. But now the doctor's like, I can't possibly work here anymore. I'm done. He just leaves. And then at the very end of the movie, we see that Helene is released and her husband picks her up. And that's it. Like, that's the whole movie. Patrick, did you like it?
It's good enough. It's not an amazing movie. I had very low expectations for it because I really didn't know much about it. I thought the acting was pretty good. I enjoyed all the familiar faces, from the Twilight Zone, including the saddest face I've ever seen. No, I liked it. I mean, it's a movie it's a story of cliches, but for all I know, this could have been the movie that invented those cliches. Like I said, it's you get the cruel Western European bitch of a warden. Mm-hmm. I say Western European, Dutch name, they're often German. You get the sympathetic doctor. I remember the doctor in, did we do The Big Dollhouse or The Big Birdcage? It's The Big Dollhouse,
The Big Dollhouse.
Right? The doctor was, like, sympathetic in that movie. I don't know how sympathetic, but I think the doctor had nothing to do with the snake torture that happened in that movie. And you get the, like, new inmate who's absolutely not ready for this. You see that in any prison movie, Shawshank Redemption. You get that kind of seasoned pro prisoner who just, like, she knows all the beats, she knows what's going on. And I found the characters pretty enjoyable. I did think it was interesting that there wasn't a whole lot of conflict among the prisoners, because that's something that I'm used to in prison movies. Again, I mentioned Shawshank, like, is that gang of people that rapes Tim Robbins. Like, not everyone gets along in Shawshank. Not everyone gets along in The Big Dollhouse, because Pam Grier fights someone in the mud, fights some blonde woman in the mud. Like, obviously, it's not all fun and games there, although that was pretty fun. So that's kind of unusual as far as prison movies go, but I wonder if maybe that's just, like, there weren't a lot of early prison movies at this point. There's also a meta moment where there's two characters talking about going to see a movie or something, and it's like, oh, is that prison picture or whatever? And she's like, yeah. And then the other one's like, they never get prison right in movies. And it's like, oh, look at that.
Yeah, and then you have to wonder, did they get prison right in this movie?
Hell no.
For the period,
No, of course not.
No.
this isn't a movie so much about life in prison. It's just a story told in a prison setting, and I think it's reasonably good. I think the wide variety of characters, each woman felt unique.
Yes, yeah.
You got the stripteaser, you got Brenda, who's just a lot of fun, you got Helene, who's like got her own things going on. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed this movie. I think it's decent, not great. Jim, what about you?
I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a good story. I enjoyed the twists and turns of the story. I did not foresee Joan's death. If I had like one complaint, it almost felt like the movie didn't really know what it was doing at the beginning, because we spent so much time focusing on...
They're feeling it out. It's like, we'll figure out which characters we're going to follow, but right now we're just kind of throwing all of them at you.
Yeah, and then we spend so much time focusing on Helene, and then she's pretty much written out of the movie. Like, she's in the movie a lot for the first 20 minutes, and then written out until the last 10 seconds.
Well, and what I think is interesting about that is that if you're going to this movie and you're thinking, whether from the nature of other prison movies or just like you have a suspicion that this is going to happen in this story, and you think a character is going to get beaten to the point of dying, you'd be like, oh, it's going to be Helene. Like that's...
Oh, yeah.
It's just absolutely, it's her. And it's not, and that's kind of interesting.
Well, it's also interesting that for a woman who doesn't want to be in prison, who really hates it in here, and who has been wronged by the female warden, she doesn't take part in the prison riot. Or at least we don't see her taking part in the prison riot.
Yeah, or maybe she's like in the background somewhere. I mean, there's a lot of characters in there.
Yeah, it was just interesting, the way in which they took this movie. But I was fine with it. Again, I enjoyed the story. It feels less exploitative.
Yeah, this one's not really an exploitation movie. You can see even from the poster they were flirting with that idea. But I think this, again, I mentioned this last episode, but the little research I did at one point, this seemed to be pointed to as being like the first women in prison movie, or kind of an early women in prison movie that other movies kind of borrowed from. And I think those other movies are when they got sleazier and more exploitative. Yeah, so this is it's proto-exploitation. Not that exploitation films didn't exist before this, but it's a film that exists in a not super exploitative way, but would inspire exploitation films. It's like Jaws. Jaws isn't an exploitation film, and many exploitation films stole from it, borrowed from it heavily, you know?
Oh, that's, you know what? I agree.
Alligator
I think that's a good way of
is an
looking at
exploitation film. Jaws is not. Cruel Jaws, a.k.a. Jaws 5, from director Bruno Mattei, is an exploitation film. Jaws is not.
Now, Alien, not an exploitation film, but would you consider Alien versus Predator to be one?
No, it just sucks. There's a difference. Okay. Forbidden World, Galaxy of Terror, exploitation movies that are Alien ripoffs.
Oh, yes. Okay. I see it. I understand.
No, Alien versus Predator is just bad. It's a bad... Most exploitation films are better than Alien versus Predator.
Well, I guess on that note, my friend, which of these two movies did you like better?
I gotta go Sisters. I don't want to say it's particularly close, but it's probably closer than I would have thought. But Sisters is good. I don't have that much to say about it. Like, it didn't blow me away the way, Body Double does, and with some of what that movie does. It's just like a well-made movie that's a relatively simple story. It takes some twists and turns that you may or may not see coming, but it's just a good film that has a couple of standout scenes. Jim, what about you? Which of these two films do you prefer?
I've got to go with Sisters as well, mostly because it's more fun in terms of comedy and just kind of how crazy it gets. But again, kind of going off of what you said,
I will say I do agree it's more fun. There is fun to be had, though, in a 1950s prison crime drama movie, just because it's kind of funny how they talk and stuff, and like I've mentioned the stripteaser numerous times. Like, just things like that are fun. It's just a different kind of fun, and they're not going to be fun for everybody. But
well, then even like at the beginning of Women's Prison, when Brenda and Helene get out of the car. Brenda's like, welcome to the clink, the can, or like whatever.
Yeah, exactly. How they talk. Like,
names,
I don't think we hear a daddy-o in this movie, but you ever see some of those 50s movies where they're saying daddy-o all the time? Like, that's just really fun to me. It's just so dumb and stupid, and it's hard to imagine people ever actually talked like that. I assume that's just how people talked in the movies, but maybe they did. I don't know.
I hope people talked like that. But no, I think Women's Prison is a fine movie. I really like the story. But for me, Sisters was just a little crazy, and I vibe with crazy, man. You know?
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, it's definitely the weirder, more out there movie. And so that's actually going to segue into the next question, of course, because we are asking if we think this works as a drive-in double feature, Sisters and Women's Prison. I'm going to say yes, but I'd reverse the two movies and have Sisters come second because it is crazier and it is weirder.
And I agree. Like,
but as for like why they work, I think you get very female-centric stories, female protagonists. We get the full spectrum of ethics when it comes to doctors. You know, we get Dr. Fraser Crane.
I wasn't even thinking that.
And we get Dr. Emil, who's one of the biggest fucking creeps in movies ever.
Dr. Cosby.
And then we get mental breakdowns in both films. I think that's kind of fun, too. With the warden in Women's Prison, the villain, and then obviously mental breakdown with a character who's kind of the villain, but she's also really a victim, too, in Danielle.
Yeah, you know, and it's funny, I didn't even look at it from that angle. And the doctor one you got me on. That's
yeah, we get the full spectrum. We got good doctor, we got evil, crazy, like, Dr. Cosby, yeah.
Psychopathic doctor.
Bill Cosby, of course, was a doctor.
Yeah.
Or is, I guess. Not a medical doctor. He's like a doctor of education.
But no, I think this works. I mean, even you could keep Sisters first. Obviously, it wouldn't work as well as having Sisters second, but you could keep Sisters first because, you know, one movie is about, it ends with a woman essentially going to prison, you know? Mm-hmm. And then you lead into a movie with women in prison.
Well, yeah, and I think the reason I'm good with Women's Prison going first, like, you know, you hear the title, and again, I'm thinking of the women in prison movies of the 70s and 80s, and so I'm expecting exploitation. I'm expecting 50s exploitation, which is its own thing. But this was like a real movie. This was released by Columbia. Like, you know, there was actual like successful actors in it. Bette Davis, of course. If Women's Prison were a little different and it were like a Roger Corman movie, it would probably be okay being second. But this is a real movie.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, it's a Sunday, and when we're recording this, so you know, cuddle up. Everybody, watch your double feature and relax.
And join us next time where I think we'll be having a guest, but the two movies we're going to do, we're going back to the 50s. We are doing The Man Who Knew Too Much by director Alfred Hitchcock. This is, of course, a remake of the film The Man Who Knew Too Much by director Alfred Hitchcock. And then we're doing a movie I've never seen and know little to nothing about from 1985, a movie called Hong Kong Godfather. So
that sounds awesome.
starring the Chinese Marlon Brando. I'm sure he ate plenty of orange chicken.
Well, that guy definitely ate anything that moved.
So join us next time, and because Jim might not be joining us, I don't know. I forgot to reach out to the guest until like a half hour before we were recording this. He did message me as we were recording, and he asked like when we'd record. I'm like, you know, I don't know. But,
and you're like, tomorrow.
So I think it's gonna work, but it's not gonna be tomorrow. I gotta see the fucking movies. Been a while since I've seen The Man Who Knew Too Much. Actually, that is a movie that the first time I saw it, I'm like, oh my god, this is like amazing. And then it's like, I've seen it once or twice since then. It's like, yeah, it's good. It's not...
Yeah, but listen, Hong Kong Godfather...
It's no Louis Teague's Alligator, I'll say that. It's no Basket Case.